Never mind lights, camera, action. All you need are a few snacks, maybe a can of beer, maybe a cup of tea or coffee, and your own front room and television, because it's now time for some Freeview film recommendations, courtesy of Van, Mr. Jurassic Park. Connor, you were out and about last night. Well, you're not Van Connor, doing us absolutely live this morning. Tell us where you were, if you'd be so kind. So, good morning, Van.
Good morning, Mr. Ross. I was at the Albert Hall last night. I was watching the 30th anniversary concert, orchestral accompaniment screening for Jurassic Park. So they had the orchestra giving us the live score for the film to celebrate its third decade. But this week they're doing a whole season of John Williams tie-ins at the Royal Albert, and I couldn't resist.
Well, I must say, it must be I know musicians are masters of their craft, but it must be such a challenge to tie absolutely to the second, to the kind of click track of a film. So what do? They play the film, I mean, they must have the dialogue up for the film. Do they strip a layer of sound out or something?
Well, they have the ability to, they mix certain channels for the audio and they just leave certain ones out. So in the case of Jurassic Park, they simply just leave the actual score track off of the film.
Ah, right.
Play the film through on the big screen as is, in the orchestra. Perfectly pitch perfect timing, obviously, accompany along. It's a hell of a time. I've seen them a few times, at the Albert Hall. Jaws I've seen a few times as well that way.
Fantastic films, and Jurassic Park has certainly stood the test of time. I saw it again about a year or so ago. But let's start with your first Freeview film recommendations, if we may, for the weekend. It's on today. What's caught your eye for today's Freeview offering, Van?
Well, one director I have a weird soft spot for, even though he should represent everything I hate and despise about films, is Peter Berg, who started out as a comedic actor, went into in dark indie dramedies with things like Very Bad Things, and then wound up becoming the director of, well, let's just say slightly lower brow movies like Battleship.
He's kind of Michael Bay de nos jours, isn't he, for our generation almost, in a sense?
He kind of is. He's like Michael Bay. If Michael Bay is high school, Peter Berg would be college. Right. Let's just say that. And in 2016, he gave us Deepwater Horizon, in which he and Mark Wahlberg decided to fictionalize the BP oil disaster and give us the story of the Deepwater Horizon drilling platform and everything that went wrong and the natural disaster that occurred, giving us an all-star cast that also includes the likes of Kurt Russell alongside Mr. Wahlberg. It's a heck of a one. It's a good old-fashioned Towering Inferno style disaster movie. Like, it goes back to the proper Irwin Allen type 70s disaster movie, but of course all wrapped up within the frameworks of this very real disaster, this very real, very true to life disaster that I think at the time of release had only happened within the past decade. So we're still relatively fresh in the minds of people, but say presented in a lot more of a sort of popcorn friendly disaster. You can see this tonight on Great Movies at 9:00. I've got a clip for you to say this is Peter Berg directing, Kurt Russell and Mark Wahlberg starring in Deepwater Horizon.
Here we go.
She put a whoop ass on Maggie and her penguin.
Get out of here.
She did.
Huh. And she did it all without this?
No.
That is a genuine dinosaur tooth.
You're a good man, Mike.
Mike, what is that? Is everything okay?
Mike.
I'm going back. I'm going back.
Wow, and in fact, I think they do interviews at the end, don't they, with the people who are actually on board the Deepwater Horizon when the disaster occurred, if memory serves.
They do. In the style of all of the best, based on a true story dramas, they have to give us that sampling of the real at the end as well.
And I've gone for something that's it's based on a true story in that the Vietnam War happened, but it's also based on a novella by Joseph Conrad called Heart of Darkness, and it is Apocalypse Now. They're billing this one. I must have seen 7 or 8 different versions of Apocalypse Now. They're billing this one on the BBC Two. It's BBC Two till like 11:05. Francis Ford Coppola's amazing film Apocalypse Now, the final cut, they're billing it as, from 1971. What the differences are, I'm not sure, though the trailer does have Playboy bunnies dancing, more of that, I think, which you don't tend to see in the first version. It's a very haunting, stark film. Martin Sheen's officer is sent up the river, and to get off the boat, to kill Colonel Kurtz. So there's a Colonel Kurtz in Conrad's Victorian novel. Colonel Kurtz has kind of gone bonkers up there in the Vietnamese jungle, killing everything he fancies, running it like some kind of tin pot dictator up there, while he's reading T.S. Eliot poetry and painting himself up in black paint and just being Marlon Brando is odd. You can say this is peak second or third career Brando, because it was around the time, wasn't it? He'd done The Godfather, around the time of Last Tango in Paris, and I suppose preceding Superman, I think, wasn't it, this film, because it was 71. It's a remarkable film, and I think this has stood the test of time, because it's a kind of weird hideous poetry to it. Also, a cameo, and you're going to hear his voice, I think, in this clip, from a very young indeed Harrison Ford, blink and you'll miss him, who is playing some kind of intelligence officer who gives Martin Sheen's character the instructions to terminate with extreme prejudice Colonel Kurtz. It's on 11:05 tonight, BBC Two. I think it's one of the key films in American 70s cinema, because I think it showed that you could offer something very strange on a huge scale. Robert Duvall's in this is amazing as Colonel Klinger, I think he's calling this one, on a huge scale, and the audience would follow you. It was when films weren't quite as kind of pre-packaged or sold as almost as kind of commodities in that sense. It could have died, absolutely failed at the box office. It didn't. This and Deer Hunter were the big Vietnam War films at the time. I think this is far less sentimental than Deer Hunter. Deer Hunter's a great film as well. This show is an absolute classic. I've never seen the final cut as billed the final cut, so I'm looking forward to this tonight. 11:05, BBC Two. Here we go. The horror. The horror.
You've heard of Colonel Walter E. Kurtz? Your mission is to terminate the Colonel's command.
Terminate. Terminate with extreme prejudice.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
He loves the smell of napalm in the morning, does he not, man? Because it smells of victory. Charlie Don't Surf either. Interesting film, that one. So what's your second recommendation, Mr. C?
One of my in fact, it probably is my favourite movie of 2013. Now an astonishing 10 years old, it is the Oscar-winning, genuinely revolutionary in terms of its filmmaking, thriller Gravity, made by Alfonso Cuarón, starring Sandra Bullock and, to a slightly lesser extent, George Clooney. Sandra Bullock is Dr. Ryan Stone. She is the astronaut who finds herself the sole survivor of a disaster in space. The movie is shot and filmed as if to replicate the feel of real time. It uses long, continuous takes. The way the film is best described as everything in the film is artificial except for Sandra Bullock's face for the bulk of it. George Clooney's face as well, but it looks photorealistic. This thing is I love a survival thriller. It's one of my favourite genres of movie. But I also love astronaut movies. And so here you get the best of both, and it is a hell of a ride. This is nail-biting to the absolute nth degree. Yeah. It's just Sandra Bullock on her own, for large chunks of it, in space, in large, continuous takes, wonderful sound design. The visuals of this are absolutely extraordinary. Like I say, 10 years old this year. 10 years since we had this out. And it was an amazing experience in IMAX 3D when it opened. And I still think they should bring it back every year in that format as like an annual celebration, because it's one of the best things they ever did with the format. But you can see it Saturday night on BBC Two at 7 p.m. It's quite a short film as well. It's only about 80 or 85 minutes, somewhere in that region. It's quite a nice, short, truncated film. More a theme park ride than a movie at times, but oh my God, so moving and powerful. So 7 o'clock, Saturday night on BBC Two. I've got a clip for you, and this is Sandra Bullock dealing with the rigors of being, lost in space.
It's a great film, this one. It's on tomorrow night. It's called Gravity. Here we go.
Houston and the Blind to confirm. Mission Specialist Dr. Stone and Mission Commander Matthew Kowalski are the sole survivors of the SDS-157.
I apologize for not complying. I should have stopped working as soon as he instructed me to.
We were going to get hit no matter what. There's nothing you could do to change that. Hey.
Yes.
All right. We have to make our way to the space station. Over there. It's a bit of a hike. We need to use their escape pod, the Soyuz, to get back to Earth.
It's a great film. He's not wrong on that one. Now, I've gone for one. It's almost obligatory for one of us to choose at least once a year. It's on Channel 4 tomorrow night, 10:25, Saturday night. He's laughing because we mentioned it many times before.
Both picked it, say weekend.
That's right. And I spotted it. I thought I'm going to get him first on this one this time around, because it's Tony Scott, one of his finest days, a great and underrated director, Tony.
Working as soon as he instructed me to.
We were going to get hit no matter what. There's nothing you could do to change that. Hey.
Yes.
All right. We have to make our way to the space station. Over there. It's a bit of a hike. We need to use their escape pod, the
the Soyuz to get back to Earth.
It's a great film. He's not wrong on that one. Now, I've gone for one, it's almost obligatory for one of us to choose at least once a year. It's on Channel 4, tomorrow night, 10:25, Saturday night. He's laughing because we mentioned it many times before. You may well have seen it.
We both picked it the same weekend.
That's right, and I spotted it. I thought, I'm going to get him first on this one this time around, because it's Tony Scott, one of his finest days, a great and underrated director, Tony, who's got the misfortune. Imagine how awful that would be, to have a brother who's even better at what you do than you are. That must be an absolute nightmare, must it not? But anyway, Tony Scott directed this one, Man on Fire. It's from 2004. Denzel Washington's in it as a kind of washed up with problems. It's almost like what might have happened to the character who plays in The Equalizer had that man not been as grounded and as philosophical bent. He's got problems with alcohol abuse and substance abuse, and he gets a job well below his skill set, guarding the daughter of a wealthy family down in Mexico City, where kidnapping is rife and can often lead to deadly results. Some people pay the money and do not get the kidnapped back, or they can end in all kinds of hideous ways. Guess what? His charge, whom he develops a kind of a very real affection for, is taken, and he then goes on the kind of mission that The Equalizer would absolutely sympathise with. It's almost kind of, I mean, you could imagine, okay, they do the build-up to it, but a lot of the action takes place within 8 to 10 hours for reasons that emerge towards the end of the film. It's a great movie, this, I think. Whenever it's on, and it's got that feel of a modern western. It's got elements of The Searchers in it, I think, given the kidnapped child, going to great lengths to find that. Whereas The Searchers runs over a number of years, this is really only over a few days. But do you think Tony Scott is underrated? Do you think there'll be a kind of a revision, a reassessment of his work?
Oh no, Tony Scott is very beloved amongst like film Twitter and things. His name popped up very recently because in an interview for Napoleon, Ridley Scott famously said, "Oh, I saw Top Gun Maverick, but it wasn't as good as my brother's one." And I thought that was a really niche, a really niche and great position to take. But Tony Scott's a banger, and you look at Man on Fire, which incidentally I always go with The Equalizer's Unforgiven.
Oh, very good.
I've been
very good.
describing this one for a while. But Tony Scott. And you look at the Man on Fire run that he did, that run from pretty much this point onwards, because Man on Fire is where his house style changes to the hyper-saturated level that it becomes. And from there you wind up with movies like Domino and his version of Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 with Denzel and John Travolta. I think he goes on quite a run. He's appreciated, I think, in his passing. He has come under reappraisal, and I think is now viewed quite rightly.
Marvellous stuff. So it's Man on Fire. It's on tomorrow night, 10:25 p.m. on Channel 4. Here we go.
What are you gonna do?
I'm gonna go get her. Anyone who gets in my way, anybody who profited from it, anybody who opens their eyes at me, I'm gonna kill him.
Tell me about Chrissy. I'd like to understand him.
A man can be an artist in anything.
It depends on how good he is at it.
Creasy's art is death. He's about to paint his masterpiece. I'm gonna kill him.
Tell me about Chrissy. I'd like to understand him.
A man can be an artist in anything.
It depends on how good he is at it.
Creasy's art is death. He's about to paint his masterpiece.
So good they named it twice there. That's the Man on Fire movie, my Saturday recommendation. Tomorrow night, 10:25 p.m. on Channel 4. Meanwhile, I was torn. I was on the horns of a dilemma on Sunday's Choice, because I was tempted first night to go for just after midnight on Film 4. If you've not seen it, folks, you like horror films, sci-fi horror, you're going to love this one. 12:40, Sunday into Monday, Film 4, Under the Skin, from 2013. Scarlett Johansson as, well, a very, shall we say, beautiful, as she always is, seductive, but absolutely terrifying female cruising the streets in the countryside around Glasgow, and people get into the back of the van with her, and many of them don't get out, and if they do get out, they're rather different to when they went in. It's called Under the Skin. It's a very good kind of science fiction horror movie, very disturbing. Some of the images in it are very disturbing. There's a scene involving a couple on a beach and a baby, which is very, very strange indeed. But instead, I've got old school. There's no school if you're not at the old school. And now, unbelievably, this film was over 40 years, so it is old school. It's from, I think, what is it? No, it's 1982, 1983. It is Sam Raimi's calling card, basically, to Hollywood, and a huge career. It's The Evil Dead, and it's just, and Bruce Campbell's the main man in it, of course. Couples go for a holiday in the woods, in a cabin. Big mistake. There's a book. Don't read from it. Don't open it. Horrible things happen. The dead rise, and are very evil indeed. And the only way to get rid of them is, well, to, shall we say, dismember is the word you use. Yeah, so it raised the game. It raised, because there's comedy in this one. It's also at times appallingly ferocious, Very scary indeed, and at one point you think, there is no way out of this, and a lot of the time, there isn't a way out for many of the characters. So I think this was one of the game changers of 80s horror, I think, wasn't it? This and films like Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff, while they were the greatest concepts, they had elements of previous films. This was something, almost a return to, like, the Romero original zombie film. It really looked like it was made for two bob, but boy, did it grip you.
Oh, absolutely. And Sam Raimi had come up with Bruce Campbell, as part of his sort of like, childhood filmmaking cadre. His brother Ted was part of it as well, had come up making Super 8 movies, and they'd made multiple different versions of this exact story, like just on the cheap as friends, and went on to make this using, small investments from like local dentists and things like that. Originally made in 81, but I think it is something like 82 or 83 by the time it gets released, because it has a very contentious time finding its way into cinemas. It becomes one of the definitive video nasties in the UK in the 1980s, and sort of finds itself lumped in with things like Nightmare on Elm Street as far as the proliferation of, the horror is destroying our youth panic that was going on around the time, the old Mary Whitehouse era. But it's an absolute banger. Bruce Campbell is one of my favourite ever presences on a film screen. I think I've mentioned before that Bruce Campbell's memoir, If Chins Could Kill, Confessions of the Movie Actor, contains brilliant run-through of all of the tricks they used to make this movie, which literally includes layering a table with Vaseline and shipping a camera down it, sliding a camera down it to get dolly shots. So you've literally got Vaseline-powered dolly shots in this movie. It's a hell of a ride. It is like no other movie. I love Evil Dead. It's one of my all-timers.
It does not stop when it starts. And the fact that I didn't realise it was locally funded in that way, because, of course, that's what also happened to that film directed by Herc Hervey, which sometimes pops up there on Talking Pictures TV, a black and white horror called Carnival of Souls, which is not like this, except for the fact that it is just strange, and you can't imagine any studio financing it. It is Evil Dead. So, of course, I'd forgotten that. It was lumped in with the whole driller killer, I Spit in Your Grave hysteria, wasn't it, at the time?
Yeah, it really was, which is strange when, as you point out, the movie is equal parts comedy and horror, because this owes such a debt to the Three Stooges on many, many occasions that they're not really being subtle about that. And like I say, there is a cartoonishness to the very, very nasty violence at times.
It's a bit like Itchy and Scratchy with human beings, isn't it? Chainsaws are involved, and axes are involved, and the Evil Dead are involved, and it is, of course, a Halloween special, although Halloween's not on Sunday, 9 o'clock on Great Movies, The Evil Dead from about, well, let's say 1983, 40 years old this year. Here's a little burst of the trailer.
I fear that the only way to stop those possessed by the spirits of the book is through the act of bodily dismemberment.
I don't care what happens to her. She's your girlfriend. You take care of her.
That'll be the obligatory firing up of the chainsaw scene there. That was The Evil Dead, which is on Sunday nights. A lovely Sunday film for you. 9 o'clock on Great Movies, Evil Dead from 1983. And your final choice, please, Van.
Well, last week we talked about Sunday nights, 9 p.m. Paramount was showing Blade, and we were talking about how it was the 25th anniversary when Blade changed the game for the film industry. And now I give you the sequel, which is showing on the same channel at the same time this week, and was, I think, the first big. Not the first, but second big studio movie that was afforded to a then emerging filmmaker named Guillermo del Toro after Mimic in 1997. So in 2002, he released Blade 2. He took the reins of the sequel, Blade 2, that sees Blade in Prague teaming up with the vampires, specifically a vampire hit squad who have all been, put together and trained specifically to hunt him. And he is forced to team up with and lead this unit when a new strain of vampire, led by one of the two members of Bros.
Luke, I think it's Luke Goss, isn't it?
Is it Luke?
Yeah, it's Luke.
Yeah. Luke Goss enters the scene as a new kind of vampire, a Reaper, a vampire that even vampires themselves have cause.
And he has a kind of facial features and teeth, a bit like the Predator creature, doesn't he, in the Predator movies? A little bit like that, weird face.
He does. His entire face opens up to be a different kind of mouth. It's really something. Heck of a time, this one. Very clubby. It's got a great supporting cast in the form of like Ron Perlman, Donnie Yen is in there, Matt Schultz, of course Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead, Danny John Jules as well, and of course Chris Christopherson's back, because you can't have a Blade movie without Chris Christopherson just roughing it up for you. And for me,
they sounded a bit more like Basil Brush than Chris Christopherson, but at least you made the effort for us.
I think I felt more like I was doing Harrison Ford in one of those "Where is my family?" thrillers. You know this movie where he runs through the streets, grabs people by the collar, and yells, "Where is my family?"
Frantic, like that strange film we made in the 80s for Polanski. They had that a lot there. Where's my wife? I've lost my wife again.
Exactly, a firewall, as I would call it, to give that forgotten Harrison Ford thriller. But yeah, like I say, Blade versus Ron Perlman and Matt Schultz is worth this movie on its own. Just the antagonism between the three of them is bags of fun, and just hearing the three go for one another and the little shots they take, that is hilarious. But of course, it's trenched in that house style of, the one and only Guillermo del Toro. So this thing looks like all of the great Del Toro movies. You can see the emerging filmmaker there. This is the guy that only a couple of years down the line is going to give us Pan's Labyrinth. This is 4 years off Pan's Labyrinth. So like I say, it's like no other one. And of course, it's the best of the trilogy. As any Blade fan will tell you, Blade 2 is the best of the trilogy. So get this on Paramount, 9:00, Sunday night. It's a great movie to wind out the weekend with. So fun, such great action, the choreography, the visuals, everything about it, and the soundtrack. The soundtrack to this thing, obviously, is killer. But I'll leave you with Blade just duking it out verbally with his new team. So this is Blade 2, like I say, Sunday night, 9:00 on Paramount.
Now, you're off screening about 8:30 your podcast dropping, or you're not doing one this week, Ben?
We are, in fact, doing one this week, so you can hear us on podcast platforms from 8 a.m., myself and Adam Ball, on the off-screen show, where this week, bags of fun to talk about. There is a movie called Cat Person this week that you've got to hear about. This thing is awesome. And if you like Promising Young Woman or Fresh, you're going to want to hear about this.
Marvellous stuff, though. Meanwhile, it's Blade 2. It's Van's final choice. Here we go.
From now on, we work as a unit. You be taking orders from me. Any questions? Good. You want to catch the hunter? You start with the prey. We'll target all the night places where vampires congregate. Blood banks, safe houses. Bigger the better. So, what's first?
With the best will in the world, and I'm in no means just to cast aspersions on the scriptwriter of Blade 2, vampires would not congregate at blood banks. Nobody congregates at blood banks. You go in, give your blood, and come out, don't you? I would say anyway. Far be it for me, though, to puncture the magic artifice of the cinema. 3 choices for me, 3 from Van Connor. So you've had 6 films to choose from. Just to log them mentally for the weekend. Meanwhile, of course, it's football all the way here on the talkSPORT network.